We have number of very interesting questions. We have about 40 minutes for discussion. I'm so glad everybody spoke within time, more or less. And I will take a few questions which have been communicated on the chat box. But I may, if I miss some important questions, I may request Srijita, are you hearing me?
Yes,
yourself to read out some questions if I'm not able to catch all that. And before I read, I will request all the three panelists, when they respond, I think we'll have 2 or 3 rounds. In one of the rounds, I would like them to address what we should do, how we can get around this crisis using the existing institutions, existing center-state framework, existing political situation, and what resources do we have, if we have any, to really pursue our objectives while continuing to critique this policy. I think you will please think about that and give us some insights. Now, in the first round, let us take some of these questions which have been in the chat box. Here is one. There is no mention of accessibility, reasonable accommodation, universal design for children or students with disabilities. Students with disabilities. How are they going to be included in the education system? Just by saying it won't happen. It is equally applicable to every child, student with disability everywhere. So that's one. Let me read out 3 questions right now. This is from Snigdha Sarkar from West Bengal. The next question, what will be the economic impact of the NEP? Is the government capable of making changes to the budget and allocate more funds to education, or is that not required? This is from Dr. R.S. Singh. Another question. One person reflects on the lack of mention of common school system in the policy document. Maybe Professor Dubey can elaborate on that. Yes, I think he should. Next, I think let me give you a few more questions and take them in one go in the first round. Arvind Mishra says, how to use education to combat against the trend of growing inequality in our society. I think this has been addressed to some extent by the speakers, but you can say more on that. Question of Facebook live stream. What will be the effect of multiple exit point? This is from the live stream, those who could not enter the 500 hall. The question is, what will be the effect of multiple exit point and distribution of certificate? Will it improve the dropout rate or not? Then what are the possible implications of increase in investment of foreign private capital in education and a gradual withdrawal of social responsibilities of the state? What is the nature of knowledge being produced then? What about access? Maybe one more I will read and then stop because there are so many questions. Professor Govinda, in line of your point of administrative reforms, which is so rightly pointed out, should we also not ally against that? It is government which designs the policy and implements it, funds it, and also evaluates it. It's sheer conflict of interest and just a status quo that they want to perpetuate this existing system, that means. Your thoughts on this, please. That is from Mahasweta Biswas. Let's take these questions, whichever you would like to take. May I start with Professor Dubey, please? Whichever questions you would like to take.
Sir, Professor Dubey got disconnected. We are trying to restore his connection.
Okay, all right.
While the other speakers can address.
Okay, Professor Govinda, please.
First beginning with your question about how do we go around. I do not know a policy is decided. There are two things about this policy that I want to say. One is this is called national education policy, but I don't know how politically the legitimacy can be attributed to this because it has not gone to parliament. Till now, India had the tradition that every policy, why only independent India? Even during the British period, in fact, the major policy statements came after approval, after it goes to the British Parliament, in fact. This is the first time that we are issuing such a big thing called national education policy, which has not gone to the parliament at all. I don't know how exactly we should really look at it as the legitimacy of a policy of this kind. It's a central government policy. That's the way I really look at it.
Okay.
Second, about the budget, I do not know whether budget will come or not. What is likely to happen, I am told that it's already in the work, that there will be a program of action. Like what happened after 1986 policy, there is a program of action. They may change the wordings so that it doesn't look like that. Like you must have realized this is national education policy. It is not national policy on education.
Okay. Yeah.
Or not. So they may make some change like that, cosmetic change. But why I'm bringing this is that in all likelihood, what will happen is that there will be another series of centrally sponsored schemes, and which has destroyed this country. In fact, in my view, education has been destroyed by the centrally sponsored scheme. They have never helped anything, and I think education was better administered by the state governments before this. So many centrally sponsored scheme and SSA came and DPEP came. I think whatever it may be, in minimal way, state governments were doing better job at that time than all these things. I do not know. This is what is likely to happen. About two things I want to quickly say about foreign private capital. I don't know whether you people have observed. There is a very strange phrase created, private philanthropy. I'm not able to understand what is private philanthropy. Philanthropy is for public purposes. It cannot be a private philanthropy. Private entrepreneurship can be there. How can private philanthropy can be there? This is very strange. It's a backdoor entry of privatization, in my view. Actually, because when somebody, a private corporate house creates a school where the school is run completely by the fee structure, fee collected from the students, it is not philanthropy. It's entrepreneurship, in fact. Good, right or wrong, it's educational entrepreneurs. Yeah. So I think this private philanthropy is a very dangerous phrase that has been created. It is for actually, it will allow the channel for not only foreign capital, even Indian capitalists also are going to misuse this. The last about bureaucracy, I think, what is one thing that I didn't mention that has happened is that this policy has added, we already have so many committees and task forces and commissions and then so many other things, institutions and all those things in this country, and we have added another 20-30 more of this kind if you read the whole thing, and this will only create the burden of the bureaucracy. The problem of administration in this country is the burden of bureaucracy, and if it doesn't happen, it is because the same bureaucracy handles finances, same bureaucracy handles control of the schools, same bureaucracy handles the other part of policy making also. I think we need to create more autonomy to the action at the field, which is only we talked about. Even in higher education, we have not been able to create autonomy of the kind. I don't know how we are going to really do this. This policy seems to have a wrong notion that by creating regulatory bodies, administrative framework will change. Regulation doesn't change. Regulation is only to see whether administration is happening properly or not. Regulatory framework will not change strengthen the administration per se. We need reforms there, which includes decentralization.
Thank you. Yes, Poonam Batra.
Thank you. I'll address those issues which have yet not been addressed. One, I think the question was with regard to future of teacher education. I'd like to say a couple of things on this. One, that the policy does not even look at the existing issues that we have. For example, in the 2019 draft, there was talk at least of 10 lakh vacancies at the school level of teacher vacancies, but there is absolutely no mention of that. The existing system is actually inundated inundated with para teachers, contractual teachers. How are we going to address that? In terms of institutional capacity, there is absolutely no word, and which was the key thing that actually the JVC had recommended, that at the state level there is very poor institutional capacity to develop teachers, and also the fact that the state investment is very low. इस वक्त हमारे देश में 95% से ऊपर टीचर एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूट्स प्राइवेट सेक्टर में है। अगर जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर काम नहीं करता तो वो इस तरफ आके देखे कि टीचर एजुकेशन में कैसे प्राइवेट सेक्टर ने बिल्कुल काम नहीं किया, क्योंकि जब टीईटी इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ, दैट इज द टीचर एलिजिबिलिटी टेस्ट व्हिच अगेन दे हैव टॉक्ड अबाउट, एक्चुअली द क्वालिफाइंग नंबर्स फॉर टीईटी वर एक्चुअली एज लो एज 1% and they probably went only as high as 15 or 17% in some states. तो अगर हमारा टीचर एजुकेशन व्यवस्था ही इतनी खराब है इंस्टीट्यूशनली, करिकुलम वाइज एंड पेडागोजी, क्या हमें उस तरफ ध्यान नहीं देना चाहिए? केवल एक एसोटेरिक 4 साल का एक तरह का प्रोग्राम बना के हम ये उसको एड्रेस नहीं कर सकते हैं. The other issue is again with regard to teaching for diversity. Our current teacher education programs have no provision to teach for diversity when all our classrooms are actually diverse. तो अगर ये शिक्षा नीति एक नॉन डाइवर्स होमोजेनाइजेशन की तरफ बढ़ रही है, तो वो चाहती है कि टीचर एजुकेशन भी होमोजेनाइज हो, लेकिन ये संभव नहीं है हमारे देश में. तो ये बहुत बड़ी चुनौती हमारे सामने है.
This covers the disability dimension.
No, I'm going to address the disability because disability is also put in the SEDG group.
Right.
So disability is also in that one basket. I do not think that disability has been addressed at all. And I feel diversity has to include the element of disability because this is a very high proportion of our children and our adult population is within this. We also have teachers actually who are visually impaired in our own department, for example, and everywhere. And how do we create an appropriate pedagogy for these children who have difficulties of all kinds? The other important aspect is with regard to multiple exit points. ये जो 1 साल का चॉइस है, फिर उसके बाद 2 साल का एग्जिट पॉइंट है इन अ 4-year undergraduate model. I think this is again to basically push out the students. It's not a question of choice because eventually it will, the system will push them out because you want to take them towards a non-academic stream into vocationalization. Vocationalization per se is not a problem, but the way it has been presented in this policy, it actually is talking about looking at vocationalization as if it's meant for those who cannot manage academic knowledges and academic pursuits. And I think that's a very wrong way of looking at it. We can have a perfectly good program for let's say tourist guides which have an excellent grounding in history, which enables a liberal arts education to make somebody take up the vocation of looking at how to enhance our tourism in terms of historical places and so on and link it up with school education. So I think that is a big problem. The last point, certainly with regard to foreign private capital, Professor Govinda has already spoken, but I think there was an important point raised here with regard to nature of knowledge. And I completely agree. The more it goes into the private hands, the research agendas are going to change. We saw that in school education. As over the years we have seen since the time of DPEP, research agendas of school education have only been driven by policy, and policy that talks about very specific things. It doesn't talk about teaching learning processes. It doesn't look at education as process.
Right. Thank you very much. Let's take another group of questions. Here is
Sir, Professor Dubey has joined, so if he can...
Professor Dubey, please. Yes. Did you hear the questions, Professor Dubey?
No, I couldn't.
You couldn't. Oh, then I think let me read out the new set of questions and you please, we'll start with you. Okay. One question is, this is from Seema Rajput. NEP is retrogressive. It doesn't talk about RT. The policy cannot ignore the legal framework, and the special training has been negated. I think that's more a comment really, but you can reflect on that. Another is from Anubhuti Patra. What should be our key priorities for advocacy and response? Should the focus be primarily on protecting RTE norms to begin with? That's a good question. Another, the RTE is still a constitutional act. Is RTE still a constitutional act? How can it be made effective again? In Odisha, the merger of schools and the push for residential schools is affecting tribal areas very badly. Meaning, what should we do about it? Next, from Dr. Alex George. On the restructuring of the school system with a 4-year stage after the 8th class lead to more dropouts and increase in child labor as it amounts to long 4-year stage. Also, it is said in the NEP that skill development will start in the 6th class, which would give further push to this process. So let us take these questions. And there is also a question on this. I think let's first take up these questions.
I also have a question.
Yeah, please. Professor.
Well, I think
Right now.
the task for the civil society organizations clearly emerges from the analysis that we have made of the national education policy. And I think the task first and foremost is to keep the RTE Act in the arena, to ensure that it is not tossed out of the arena, which is the unstated purpose of the report as it has dealt with RTE. Second thing is that, as I pointed out, that the future agenda should have been carryover from the problems that have arisen with regard to RTE and how RTE can be used for universalization at other levels of education, where right now it is confined to elementary education. And it is not a question of vague thing that from preschool to class 12 it will be universalized. It has to be very specific that there should be a legal provision for that. Children should enjoy some rights of their own, and if this is extended to elementary school children, there is no reason why this should not be extended to pre-primary school children and to secondary school children. So the second task of the civil society organizations is to see how the scope of RTE can be expanded to include children in these levels. I think that our children are better off moving towards universalization, through the medium of the RTE Act, rather than through a vague general promise that this should be done in the future, and in the process, as I say, toss out the RTE Act from the arena. So I think the task for the civil society organizations is cut out from the analysis that we have done.
Thank you very much. Yes, Professor Govinda, you want to come in? And there are
2-3 points.
three more questions I can add. One is, are the entrance examinations which are focused instead to replace the board examinations going to be instruments of further inegalitarian development? Then I think all of you should also take up another question. Has the gender question been addressed critically centrally enough in this policy. There is a good comment on the whole draft. It promotes outcomes without inputs. I'm sure you all will agree with that. Yes, Professor Govinda.
Now, I'll make 2-3 points. One is, taking on from where Professor Batra mentioned, this SCDGs. If you look at the earlier, if you remember the earlier draft, there was something called URGs. That is under URGs, under-resourced groups or underserved group or something like that.
Underrepresented.
Underrepresented groups. There are so many acronyms. Underrepresented groups, and there were many people who commented that no, you cannot put all of them in one basket. What they did, they didn't change the basket, only change the name. They put a different name. That's all what they have done. Girls, of course, have been taken out a little bit, and then there is a separate thing said about the educationally disabled. That's what they have done otherwise. But the mechanism they are thinking still is the same. They will create, like the economic zone, they will create special education zones. It's again a new name, nomenclature for what earlier we used to do called the educationally backward blocks. What else are we going to do after all? We will identify the blocks which has predominantly scheduled castes. So this is a special economic education zone. Is what we are going to do. So I can already see the what would be the new set of centrally sponsored schemes that is going to come for distribution of money or withholding of money, because the centrally sponsored schemes have also become a means of political leverage with different party governments which are there in the states. We know that. So this is what I find. Now about the RTA, what can we do now that they have pushed it aside? Is that I think we need to raise a political campaign on this. Not just like the talking academic things is not enough. I think the voice has to be raised politically in terms of how can you really ignore the most important thing in the country, which is the fundamental right of the children, that you are not really referring properly as to how will you meet the fundamental right. This should come as a political voice. And I would request RTE to really gather this political voice and raise this political voice. Then only something can happen. Otherwise, I don't think anything will happen. Now, there was some reference made about this Orissa, what is happening about the merger and all. Now, why is it happening? It is not just Niti Aayog alone. Niti Aayog actually entered into a tripartite agreement, that is the government, state governments, Niti Aayog and Boston consultants. So this is actually, we have already handed over our system for international consultants to really rectify, because we have no understanding. We have no understanding of our country. This is Atmanirbhar. We are Atmanirbhar. Therefore, we hand over to Boston consultants. Even to improve our primary schools, they have to come and then tell us. And what they are telling is that close down your schools. And we seem to be happy closing down. Unfortunate, this is what is happening in Orissa, sir, Professor Mohanty in our state. And this is what is happening in Jharkhand. 3 states have signed a tripartite agreement of this kind for other people to tell what to do in our own primary schools. This is unfortunate. You don't have to bring foreign investment for this. We are already doing all these things. Now, one question about this 4-year secondary that are there, which may lead to dropout that you are asking. Actually, I am not really bothered about this stage, restructuring they are talking, because it's only notional. It will remain only on the paper. It will never happen. I will tell you one example. Why I'm saying I am not bothered at all is that where is 4 years today? 4 years is there in the CBSE schools. You go to UP and Bihar, you have inter colleges which are doing the 11th and 12th. And you go to Karnataka, there is a junior college which is doing 11th and 12th. Andhra Pradesh, there is another junior college which is doing PU college or somewhere. Maharashtra junior colleges are doing in this. So where is this 4 that we are talking about? It is about CBSE. Unfortunately, I feel very often, repeatedly, I get the feeling when I read this policy that all that is there in the name of school in front of them seems to be the private CBSE affiliated schools which run classes from grade 3 to grade 12. Yes, this restructuring will happen in those schools because it's possible to integrate the age 3 to 8. You can integrate as one group. That is possible because children, when they are 3-year-old, they come and they leave when they are 18-year-old. So are we writing a policy for this CBSE affiliate, you'll be shocked to know, sir, that how many CBSE affiliated schools are there in this country? Is only around 20,000. This includes CBS, it includes Navodaya Vidyalayas and Kendriya Vidyalayas also. But how many schools we have? We have 1.5 million schools that we are talking. And these are 20,000 schools. How can you write policy keeping that as your model? And that seems to be the problem in this restructuring of the stages that we are talking.
Thank you. Yes, Poonam, please.
I'll just say a couple of things. One is that certainly the policy is paving the way for private schools as well as higher education centers. There's no doubt. I don't think it is even sort of hiding it. It's saying it very clearly. The issue is that when it talks about bringing in special education zones and enabling quality, equitable education for all, it doesn't seem to connect to the reality that in the past few years, actually there has been a substantial reduction in the education budget over the 5 years, which has led to reducing allocations to scholarships for the marginalized students. So many of them were not able to, and therefore they were affected in the sense they could not continue their education. So certainly allocating more funds is not even there. The 2019 draft at least talked about it in some way, even though there was inadequacy in the way they presented it. But right now there's no talk about that. Clearly they are leaving it and pushing it in the private sector. And in terms of the curricular and pedagogical restructuring of school education, of course there will definitely be the risk of more high dropout. And already with the pandemic, we see many people losing their livelihoods and children being pushed into labor again. That is, we are seeing that already happening. In fact, what we have seen is a vulgarization of inequality on the streets of every city that we have seen for so many months now. But I think the more important thing is that by rearranging these curricular pedagogic structures, even though it may not mean very much on the ground in terms of infrastructure, but it is going against the constitutional categorization of elementary education, and the RTE is directed towards that. So we are diluting the constitutional provisions every time we are trying to change these things, and that is where we need to actually direct our objections and our struggle.
Thank you. Professor Dubey, yes.
Well, a couple of points which I missed out in the beginning. One is about this, the suggestions on making school education equitable and inclusive. My view is that what they have put forward by way of suggestion are old tired measures that have been experimented and implemented on the ground in India in the wider context of development and elimination of poverty. And these measures are, identifying territories where the large number of populations are from backward, economically backward classes, identify groups which would need special assistance, create funds. These have been tried in the case of elimination of poverty and development, and it has not worked. And it has not worked simply because the structural problem existing in this area has not been tackled. And for example, you have this whole question of multi-layer school system in India. Now, so long as you have this multi-layer school system, where children from one class of parents go to one school and other class go to the other school, out of these 5-6 layers that you have, sometimes people have counted up to 10 or 11, inequality will remain. And if you had implemented 5-year universalization provided for originally, then everybody would have got quality elementary education. irrespective of the community. So the question of special measures for the economically backward classes comes in only when you have no intention to universalize. You have no intention to put in the resources to be able to universalize. But politically, you can't stay still. You will be under tremendous pressure to do for these sections of the population. And then you come out with these measures. But experience has proved that these measures are really not very helpful. And so the ultimate analysis, I come down to my pet, kind of idea that ultimate analysis is to have a common school system.
Exactly.
Because you can deal with inclusive inequality and exclusive exclusion mainly within the framework of a common school system, where you would not have these different classes of school, where you would have only one kind of school, and you would have other schools which will be for experimental purposes, which are being done in the Western countries also, which have really become developed by adopting the system of common school system. They are also the experiment. And they allow some schools in the private sector to experiment so that there could be a feedback to the school system as a whole. So that we will also allow. But common school system, and it's a great pity that there is no mention of common school system in the entire report. The people who drafted should have at least have the courage of saying that we should start. 68 policy where Kothari had suggested that you experiment it in one in each district and like that. It was not done in spite of the recommendation, and there is now no mention of that at all.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much.
Can I make a small point?
Yeah, your last statement, yeah.
There is a question that is there, mathematical problem. Somebody has said that, how can you have these stages? Because you are talking of public examination kind, external evaluation to be done, testing at 3, 5, and 8.
Yeah.
Actually, this kind of inconsistencies, the document is full of such inconsistencies. There are what is said in one, you will find that in another recommendation, it doesn't really match with that. Because although they have said all these stages, they continue to use primary and elementary, as though primary and elementary exist as they are. In fact, this kind of inconsistency is full of it. There is reference to chapters, but there are no chapters. You can read it, in fact. There is no chapter, but there are reference to chapter word in the document. That may be because when they made it smaller, shorter, they forgot that they should change. There is also, it should please us, in fact, there is one place where they talk of universal, free and compulsory education from age 3 to age 18 in one place. Although earlier they have not proposed anything in the review. If you go to the regulation section, in the review, what do they review? When they review periodically, they will review the availability of free compulsory education, universal free compulsory education from age 3 to age 18. If there is no policy like that, how did they review? I don't know. So it's full of such inconsistencies. I don't want to really take into that.
Thank you. Poonam, last word?
Well, I think I've said
also
enough.
on gender, if you want to add something.
Okay. Well, gender.
We didn't refer to
Gender too is part of SEDGs.
Exactly.
So actually there is, and I think the impact on girls will definitely be very high, specifically in terms of school mergers and privatization, because we already know that in whenever there's the option of sending a child to a private school, which many parents have been preferring for in the name of quality, they have been sending their male children there, and girls have been left in so-called state schools. So gender is certainly a concern. I think it is an equal concern at the higher education level as well.
Thank you. Well, friends, I think this has been an extraordinarily useful discussion. And there are 3 main points. One, RTE must be reiterated and expanded, at least in our framework. the Professor Dubey reiterated about the common school system, and that still should be our goal, and how the conditions in the local environment can be created by persuading political parties, state governments to make the existing government schools move towards common schools, making the private schools superfluous if possible. And common school has to be the goal. So that is number one. RTE has been ignored in this draft, in this policy statement, no longer a draft, though it lacks legitimacy until it is passed in the parliament. So it has been ignored, and we have to reiterate our full commitment to RTE and to strengthen it. Number two, I think the socially, educationally disadvantaged groups, I think that's a very unfortunate way of handling inequalities and calling it a equitable and quality inclusive education. It is not. And therefore, all sections of our society, their political and social organizations, political parties, groups, Dalit groups, gender groups, Adivasi groups, Adivasi youth groups, Dalit women groups, workers' children welfare groups, construction worker groups, all groups should have a critique, a sectoral critique, sectoral assessment of this policy, and have an agenda cut out how to make their constitutional right possible by moving in the direction of new education policy that they would like to have. This is number two. Number three, I think the centralization that we have seen is unprecedented. Cooperative federalism has given a go-by, and these 4 or so regulatory bodies which seek to centralize everything, I think they have to be challenged. And the concurrent list gives enough power to the states to have their regulatory bodies that can decentralize regulation also, and supervision also, and coordination also to district and block level. And panchayats have to be brought into the implementation of the RTE in the full sense of the term that we are discussing. Therefore, decentralization has to be pursued as a goal, and this centralization has to be questioned. I know it is difficult because the resources are centralized in the hands of the state, hands of the central government, and central government pledges to give more resources to the private sector than to the public investment in education, health, and the like. So we have to keep on pressurizing, use the electoral weapon, movement weapon, and the way they have critical role to play in different sectors. We have to use those critical roles that people have to pressurize and demand reallocation of resources to education and health particularly, and with a view to promoting equality. Finally, here is a notion of education. It says that it combines humanities and with skill, but that is only on paper. The underlying motive is to robotize education. The focus on skill and vocationalization, and make it so dependent on the net and the IT and the global network of technological things and capital intensive technology, making it impossible for the poor and the deprived to take full advantage of new education, as we have seen during COVID, during online facilities of education and so on. And that is going to be the new norm. So privatization, foreign institutions coming to India, and this whole motive has a new definition and a very blatantly clear definition of education as skill, not as integral development of mind and skill and values, which the RTE Act said in the preamble, or the Common School Education Commission report had talked about in the beginning. In other words, we have to really work hard to promote humanities, liberal arts, social sciences, and also make RTEs the line of most important work. Only then the base for having bright people come from a wider base for research and innovation and higher education and development, that will emerge. If the base is weak, then the entire system is weak. And this new education policy threatens to keep the base weak, divided, unequal, privatized, and robotized, besides communalized. We didn't discuss very much on communalization as an underlying theme. So with these words, I once again thank you for a great discussion. May I invite Ambarish Rai to have the last word. Ambarish.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for a wonderful moderation and people will get involved into that. और मैं इसी के साथ साथ जो हमारे आज के स्पीकर्स थे, एमिनेंट स्पीकर्स, उनको भी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूँ और ऑडियंस को भी. एंड वी विल कीप इट ऑन और नेशनल एजुकेशन पॉलिसी को लेकर के चर्चा और हम लोग करेंगे और फिर देन वी विल, जैसा आप लोगों ने कहा कि एक पॉलिटिकल मूवमेंट अराउंड द यूनिवर्सलाइजेशन ऑफ education, not only universalization education, but extension of the RT will be the core issue. Whole school education should be the justiciable right for every child in this country. तो वो लेकर के हम लोग आगे बढ़ेंगे और इस पर मोबिलाइजेशन देश भर में किया जाएगा. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. एक wonderful discussion, very yes sir.
Bye bye.
Thank you.